The kitchen smelled of roast beef, heavy and rich, the kind of smell that makes your stomach ache when you haven't eaten. My son, Noah, tugged at my sleeve, his little voice whispering, "Mama, I'm hungry." I knelt down, smoothing his hair, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "I know, baby. Just wait. We'll get you something." But when I turned to the table, the plates were already being set. My sister Kayla, beaming in her glossy makeup, carried in a steaming dish. Her twins, 5 years old, both with perfect curls and shiny shoes, squealed and clapped at the sight of the meat. Dad sat at the head of the table, beer in hand, grinning with pride. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. And then there was Mom, knife in one hand, fork in the other, cutting thick slices of beef and laying them onto Kayla's children's plates, one after another, until the juice ran across their potatoes. I stepped closer, my hands shaking, Noah clutching my leg. "Mom," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can he have a piece?" "Just a small one. He hasn't eaten all day." The room went still for a moment, the sound of Kayla's kids giggling filling the silence. Mom looked up at me slowly, her eyes narrowing. Then, before I could take another breath, her hand cracked across my face. The slap echoed in the kitchen, stinging my skin, burning worse than fire. I staggered back, clutching my cheek. Noah gasped, holding my hand tighter. "Why feed trash?" Mom hissed, her voice sharp and loud enough for everyone to hear. "When your sister's kids deserve the meat." Kayla laughed, her fork hovering in the air. "Oh, Mom, that was perfect. Finally, she knows her place." Dad took a long swig of his beer, shaking his head with a chuckle. "You've got some nerve asking for more after everything we already give you. Be grateful you're even sitting at this table." Noah's voice was small, almost a whisper, but everyone heard it. "I'm not trash." His little lip trembled as he pressed his face into my side. Kayla's twins laughed. One pointed at Noah and shouted, "Trash boy!" The other followed, chanting, "Trash boy! Trash boy!" I froze. My arms locked around Noah, but my mind went blank. Their voices, my mother's slap, my father's sneer, it all swirled together, pounding in my head. "Stop it!" I snapped, my voice cracking, but the laughter only grew louder. Kayla leaned back in her chair, satisfied, her children repeating the chant like it was a song they'd rehearsed. Mom carved another slice of meat and dropped it onto Kayla's plate. "This is for the children who matter," she said firmly, her eyes never leaving mine. "Not for leeches." The words stabbed deeper than the slap. I wanted to scream, to throw the plate across the room, to make them all see how wrong they were. But Noah's trembling hand held me still, his small eyes filled with tears as he whispered, "Mama, let's just go." And so I did. I turned, silent, my cheek burning, my pride shattered, and I carried him out of that kitchen. Behind me, laughter spilled again, my parents, my sister, her kids, as if my pain was the entertainment. I shut our bedroom door, slid down against it, and held Noah tight while his tiny body shook in my arms. That night, long after he had fallen asleep, I sat awake in the dark. The house still smelled of roast beef, rich and mocking. My face still burned from her slap, but what hurt worse were her words, echoing in my head. Trash. Not worth feeding. Not even equal to a dog. But I realized something as I stared at the shadows on the wall. If they thought I was trash, then I had nothing left to lose. And if I had nothing left to lose, then I had everything to take from them. The days after that slap blurred together, but the sting didn't fade. Not from my cheek, and not from the words that had cut through me harder than the hand ever could. Every time Noah looked at me with wide, hungry eyes, the echo returned. Why feed trash when your sister's kids deserve the meat? At breakfast the next morning, Kayla strolled into the kitchen wearing a silk robe, hair still in rollers, yawning like she'd worked the night shift I had just dragged myself home from. Mom was already plating eggs and bacon for her and the twins, while Noah sat at the corner of the table, staring down at a bowl of watery oatmeal. "Where's mine?" I asked, my voice steady but quiet. Mom didn't even turn. "Eat scraps, like always," That's what trash does. Kayla smirked, stirring her coffee. Honestly, Mom, why do you even give her a chair? She takes up space that should be mine. Her twins giggled, echoing, Trash doesn't need a chair. Dad walked in then, buttoning his shirt, his voice booming as he grabbed Kayla's toast off her plate and stuffed it in his mouth. She should be grateful we don't feed her outside with the dog. Noah looked up, eyes wide, and whispered, Mama, I'm not a dog. My throat closed. I wanted to scream, to throw every plate against the wall, to grab my son and run until my legs gave out. But I didn't, because I knew if I broke then, in front of them, they'd win again. So I stayed silent. But silence didn't mean weakness. While they laughed at me, I was watching. I noticed Kayla's obsession with her phone, the way she checked every comment, every like, every photo. She lived for people's approval. Without it, she was nothing. I noticed Dad's pride, how he puffed up when neighbors came over, bragging about being the man of the house, the father of a successful family. If even a crack showed in that image, he'd crumble. And Mom, her weakness was in the shadows. She wanted everyone to believe she was the perfect mother, selfless, adored, the glue that held the family together. She'd collapse if her silence was exposed as cruelty. At night, while Noah slept, I started writing, page after page of their words, their actions, their cruelties. Not for police, not for a courtroom. No, this wasn't about law. It was about breaking them the way they'd broken me. I saved every cruel chant the twins repeated, every sneer from Kayla, every slap of Mom's hand, every insult from Dad. I wasn't just writing memories, I was sharpening knives made of truth. One evening, after another dinner where Kayla's kids feasted on steak while Noah picked at cold rice, I caught Mom watching me from across the table. Her face was smug, certain she'd finally stamped me out. You're quieter these days, she said, cutting meat for Kayla's children. Good, maybe you're finally learning your place. I looked her straight in the eye for the first time in years, and I smiled. It wasn't big, it wasn't obvious, but it rattled her. She blinked, shifting in her seat. Kayla frowned. What are you smiling about? I shrugged. Just thinking. Dad grunted, suspicious. About what? I leaned back in my chair, Noah's little hand holding mine under the table. About how fast things change. The room fell silent for a moment, and in that silence, I felt something shift. The power wasn't fully theirs anymore. Not because they'd grown weaker, but because I had stopped giving them what they wanted. The begging, the crying, the crawling. I fed Noah, tucked him in, and kissed his forehead goodnight. And as I sat in the dark by his side, I whispered to him, They'll never call you trash again, baby. Not when I'm done. Because the next family dinner wasn't going to end with me walking out hungry and humiliated. It was going to end with them choking on the very pride and vanity they worshipped. And I was going to make sure of it. The next Sunday, Mom insisted on another family dinner. She called it tradition, though for me and Noah, it had always been ritual humiliation dressed in china plates and gravy boats. I said yes. That night, the house smelled of roasted chicken, herbs, butter, the kind of meal Noah hadn't tasted in weeks. He clutched my hand as we walked into the dining room, his eyes darting between the steaming platters and the laughter already bubbling from Kayla and her kids. Dad sat at the head of the table, Kayla beside him, Mom bustling around with serving spoons. Sit! Mom snapped at me, pointing to the end of the table. I did. Calm. Quiet. The food was passed around. Thick cuts of chicken, golden potatoes, warm bread. Every plate filled but mine. Noah's bowl had a few scraps of plain rice. Kayla's twins grinned, pointing at him. Trash boy's dinner. Laughter roared again. Kayla clapped her hands. Perfect. I swear. He's finally learned his role. I waited. I let the laughter grow, let their smugness peak. And then, when Mom reached for the gravy boat, I placed my hands flat on the table and spoke, Not tonight. The room froze. Forks clinked against plates. Dad's head snapped toward me, his eyes narrowing. What did you just say? I met his gaze. Not tonight, not ever again. Kayla snorted. Oh God, here we go. She's trying to act tough. Mom sneered. Sit down and shut up before I cut her off. Before you slap me? Before you call my son trash? Go ahead, do it in front of everyone. They stared, stunned at my boldness. For the first time, silence hung heavier than their laughter. That's when I stood and lifted the covered dish I'd brought with me, one no one had bothered to ask about when I walked in. I set it right in the middle of the table and slowly removed the lid. Inside wasn't food. Inside was everything they had thrown at me. Collected, saved, transformed into evidence of their cruelty. Torn clothes Noah had outgrown because they never let me buy him new ones. Grocery receipts showing the scraps I'd been forced to live on while Kayla feasted. A pair of Noah's shoes with holes in the soles placed neatly on top. Kayla laughed nervously. What the hell is this? Trash in a bowl? I looked her dead in the eyes. Exactly, the trash you left us with. And now you get to eat it. Gasps filled the room. Dad slammed his fist down, veins bulging. You dare mock this family? I smiled faintly. I'm not mocking you. I'm showing you. I turned toward the neighbors who had gathered. Yes, I had invited them again. I'd told them it was a special dinner, one they wouldn't want to miss. And now they were here, their faces stunned as they watched the proud family unravel. Mom's hand shook on the serving spoon. You've embarrassed us? No, I interrupted. You embarrassed yourselves. You slapped your own daughter for asking to feed her child. You called my son trash. You worshipped Kayla's kids while you starved mine. Kayla stood, face red. You're lying. You're twisting it. But Noah's little voice broke through, trembling but clear. Grandma hit Mama. Grandpa laughed. Auntie called me trash. The neighbors gasped. Murmurs rose like a tide. Eyes shifted, no longer at me, but at them. Dad tried to roar over the noise. Shut that boy up! He's... But the words stuck in his throat, because the neighbors weren't laughing. They were shaking their heads, disgusted. One woman muttered, monsters. And then Tyler, Kayla's fiancé, who I'd made sure was sitting at the far end, stood abruptly. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He looked at Kayla with pure disgust. You let your mother slap her? You called a child trash? And you laughed? Kayla stammered. Tyler, it's not like... But he pushed his chair back so hard it screeched. We're done. He left, the slam of the front door echoing louder than any slap ever had. Kayla screamed, clutching her hair, mascara streaking her face. Mom's spoon clattered to the floor, her perfect image shattering. Dad slumped into his chair, rage boiling but powerless under the weight of the stares around him. I gathered Noah into my arms, his small face pressing into my shoulder. I turned to my parents one last time. You wanted him to see me crawl, I said softly. Tonight, he saw you crawl instead. And with that, I walked out. The laughter that had once haunted those walls was gone, replaced by silence, choking, heavy silence that would never leave them. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.